Hi, you guys, it's Tonya, and today I want to share with you a mixed media card featuring products from Limor Webber Designs. This is going to be a Father's Day card from start to finish. We're going to use the Lindy Stamp Gang Limor signature products, the Industrial Chic, and we're also going to use her signature products with IndigoBlu. This is the Splattered Heart A6 and the Limor Circles. Amazing stamps. Love them. Look at all this luscious texture here on the heart stamp. I'm using a Versa ink pad to ink this up really well. I want to make sure I'm getting ink into every one of these little crevices and create this luscious texture. And I'm pressing this onto a piece of Tim Holtz watercolor paper that I have cut down to 4 inches by 5¼ inches, which happens to be a 1/4 inch smaller than my A2 card size. So now I'm going to sprinkle the white embossing powder on it. And I'm not sure if I said this or not, but I'm using the smooth side of the cardstock, not the ridged side. And look at all of that texture, and we haven't even heat set this yet. So just yummy, yummy yumminess. So now I'm going to use the Time Travel Teal, but before I spritz it on, I want to spritz my paper with water, and then I'm just going to spritz one time. My bottles are brand new, and I just filled them, so I probably overfilled them, but I've also had to prime the pumps to get them to spray. So the green color that you see there is from the Industrial Chic collection, and that's the Rusty Lantern Lime. And then I'm going to spritz a little more water over the top because the colors just seemed a little too saturated for the look I was after. So you can always tone them down with a little bit of water. And now I'm just taking a tag that I have off on the side of my desk to mop that luscious color up. No point in wasting it, and I will use that in another project. So now I'm pulling out those IndigoBlu Limor Webber Designs Limor Circles, and I'm coloring that up with my Stampers Big Brush Artist Pen in Nougat number 178, and I'm going to stamp that around, and it just offers a bit more interest there to my background. Gives it a little another dimension. So now I'm going to trace the inside of my heart with one of these fine tip, ultra fine tip Sharpie pens, and it just happened to be the pen I reached for. It no particular reason other than it is waterproof, so if I decide to add more texture or more water to this later, it will resist bleeding and things like that. But I just wanted to do a fine shadow there on the inside of my heart just to sort of bring it more to the front and give it a little more presence, and it offers a great shadow there to the inside. Now I'm going to stamp the same stamp onto a wood veneer piece from Prima. I do want to make sure this is really good and dry before I go to the next step, so I'm going to hit it with my heat gun for just a second. And the reason for that is this is India ink, and once it dries it's permanent, so I don't have to worry about it bleeding. So I'm going to spritz that again with the Rusty Lantern Lime. And never fear the mess I have made there. I will mop it up with that little cosmetic sponge and use it again. So now I am going to take our magicals, and you know, Sherry, our other design team member, has been sharing a couple of tutorials on the blog in the last month on magicals. So she inspired me, thank you Sherry, for using these. I have them in my stash, and I didn't think about it because you have all of the sprays, right? So what I've done is I've taken, this is an older one. I'm not even sure if it's still in production, but I'm sure you can find a similar color. This is the Cocoa Bean Copper, and I've added a little bit of matte medium to it from Faber-Castell Design Memory Craft, and I've very chunkily added it to the top of that clock. It's going to make it look like corroded metal. So fun. Now I've diluted it down with a little bit of water, and I'm going to paint the inside of my heart. I just felt like it needed just a bit more presence. So this rust color just makes it fits the theme of corroded metal and shabby chicness, and I just love it. So then I decided, what if the edges of my card were actually rusting as well? So to get that to encourage to drip, because it is kind of thick with that matte medium there, I am just diluting it with water and spritzing some water on it to get it to drip. So I love the look. It looks like the card edges are just rusted up. So fun. I love grunge. I absolutely love grunge. I'm so excited that that is Limor style as well, because it gives me an opportunity to play with these techniques and things. So for my next step, I am going to pull out a flat shot that I haven't diluted yet, or mixed up yet. And this is from the Caribbean. It is the, what is it? It's Caribbean Blue. So I'm just going to pull a little tiny spot of that. A little bit of this pigment goes a really long way. I'm going to pull a spot of that out and dilute it with a little bit of water, and then I'm going to paint it onto this wood veneer. I've had these in my stash for a while. I think they're from, I don't even know who they're from. I think they're like Cosmo Cricket or something. They've been in my stash for a year or so, so I encourage you to go back to your stash. If you can't find these little wood veneer frames, look through your stash and see if you can find something similar, or die cut something. It's just a couple of rectangles. You could easily die cut this or cut it with an X-Acto knife and use chipboard instead. So I've just colored that up a little bit, and notice that even though the pigment was highly concentrated there on the frame, when I spritzed it with water, it did dilute down, continue to dilute, which was nice. So I'm going to heat set that and let it dry really well. And now it's time to start assembling my card. Or wait, one more element to put together. This is a piece of scrap. It's from a die cut that I have from Diversions Die. It's a really nice fence background that I've cut just into a small piece section. I've used my Versa ink there to ink it up, but I don't think I inked it very well, since it's kind of holey, so it's hard to get it into those little crevices and stuff. I'm going to use the Stampendis's Frantage sampler pack of embossing powders. These are super chunky embossing powders, so it's really hard to get them to stick sometimes, but once they stick, oh my goodness, they make the coolest corroded look ever. So they're super chunky and sometimes hard to work with, but they are variegated as well, so they give you a really nice tone on tone effect. So I'm going to heat set that up real fast, and you'll watch as the metal just comes to life. It really looks like a piece of corroded fencing. So love it. Look at that. It's shiny, but it's dull in some places too. So it just gives it a really cool effect. So now it's time to start assembling my card. So I'm going to put that fencing there on the left, and then I'm going to frame the card with the chipboard piece. And while I'm assembling all of this, I just want to remind you that I will put a link down below to the blog post that has a list of all of the products used today, and links up to purchase them from Limor's store. So make sure you check that description box down below for details. What I've found here for my other elements is, in my stash, I had the grunge board number set, so I have a number 1 there. And then I also had a hashtag from, I think it's Studio Calico's Wood Veneers. So I decided to make it number 1, since this is a Father's Day card, and number 1 dad. Now, I will say that I'm using the gel medium as my glue here, and this gel medium does take a bit to dry, so I'm going to put just a spot of hot glue on it to hold my frame in place until the gel medium has a chance to dry. Now, in hindsight, I should have walked away from this project at this point and allowed these elements to dry, but I didn't. I kept fussing with it, so you'll see me add some more adhesive later on in the video. So here's my fencing, and I'm just adding a little gel medium to it and trying to place it down, and that's where I had popped up that little bit of hot glue from the cardstock. But it's okay. I just figured, well, the gel medium's still there. It'll eventually dry, right? So I'm going to put a little bit more of that hot glue there underneath the Polaroid just to hold it in place. So now I'm going to take that same Stampers Big Brush Artist pen. This is the Nougat number 178, and I'm going to color up that number 1. The grunge board makes it look like leather. It's really cool. But if you do this effect, please make sure you color the edges of all of your grunge board. And if you don't happen to have this number set, you could die cut a number from a piece of chipboard too. So never fear, there's always an alternate to whatever we're doing. So now I'm going to add a little gel medium to that number 1. on and a little spot of hot glue. Please keep in mind if you do use grunge board that hot glue does not bond to grunge board at all. So it's just a temporary fix till that gel medium decides it wants to dry. So now I'm going to take my number 1 there and add a little bit of that Stampers Big Brush Artist Pen to it as well. It's going to have a little bit of a different color tone since this is wood and the wood is soaking up the pigment from the ink, and it has a little different texture anyway. But I like that they're both the same color because now they sort of look like they belong together. So I'm just going to apply a little hot glue to that and put it down. I think at this point I decided to quit messing with that gel medium too much, but so I have number 1 right there. Now the next thing I want to do is I'm going to find placement for my clock and use a little bit of foam adhesive so that it is the same level with my Polaroid there on the left. And then I am going to go through this pack of ephemera that I got from Limor's shop, and this is the Tim Holtz Expedition ephemera. And I pulled out the smallest of the hand, and then there's also a street sign in there that says special delivery. And since this is for Father's Day, and I'm probably going to hand deliver it to my dad, the special delivery just seemed to work. And it helps to give some sort of visual element across the top of the Polaroid, and it kind of connects the clock to the Polaroid. So now I'm going to find placement for that hand, and the hand is sort of pointing to the side, like open up the card. So I am going to place that right above that special delivery in that little hole. It just nestled in there really nicely. It helped to connect the heart to the other elements on the page too. So I'm just, again, going to add a little bit of foam adhesive under the word special delivery so that it's the same height as the clock and it doesn't get smushed. These are some teeny tiny little stars from Studio Calico. They're wood veneers, and I think I've had these in my stash for a year or two now, but they have lasted like forever because I think there's like 100 of them in this little thing, and some of them are so tiny it's very hard to hold on to them. I'm just applying a little bit of gel medium to the back of them and scattering them around the card, and I just love how they are adding all of that. They're kind of bringing all of the elements together and just bridging that gap between all of the embellishment clusters. So super loving it, and I love that these stars are super tiny and they offer that wood element back to them as well. Now be very careful with this next step. I pulled out my India ink. For those of you who follow me for a while, I have been practicing with some calligraphy, so I bought some India ink. I decided I needed some black splatters on this card. Okay, how daring is that at this point? So what I've done is I've got a fine liner paintbrush here that I've dipped in my India ink, and I've just added a little water to it to encourage it to run. Now when you do water this down, it goes from black to like a light to a gray color, but that's okay. I could handle that as well. But no project is complete without a few black splatters, right? So I've added those on there. Now I'm also going to hand write with this liner brush the word dad, because when I got to looking at it, I was like, you know what, he's the number 1 dad. So I really like the way the dad is going up the side of the number 1 like that. It just adds another little visual reference there and includes part of my sentiment. So I am going to allow this India ink to dry really well because it's bubbled up there in the bottom, and I don't want to make a mess of this. So as I'm cleaning up my supplies, you'll notice I pull out my heat gun, and I am going to really make sure, like, I didn't want my dad to run or any of that. So I made sure I heat it really good. Now I'm coming back with that Lindy Stamp Gang, and this is the Time Travel Teal from the Industrial Sheet Collection, and I'm just going to spritz some in the shadows. So it just kind of helps to ground everything and give everything a little bit of unity. And so I'm going to stay in that bottom left-hand corner region, and notice I'm still fussing with that wood veneer piece. I really should have just left it alone and let it dry in the beginning. I wouldn't have had to fight with it so much. But when we get into those cycles where we're trying to do things sort of quickly, we lose sight of that. So sometimes you just have to be patient. Now the one nice thing too about the India ink is that once it dries, it's permanent, so I didn't have to worry about it bleeding with all these wet mediums afterwards. So if you use a different type of ink for your splatters, beware, it could run if you continue to add more moisture. Also note that I started this out with a piece of cardstock that was actually watercolor paper. That is going to help to eliminate some of the buckling. It does buckle a little, but not nearly as bad as it would with cardstock. Plus, notice I'm not getting any beating up that I would get from cardstock by using all of these wet mediums. So again, I just added a few more little spritz of that Rusty Lantern Lime there in the upper right hand corner. Now I'm going to take my Stampers Big Brush Artist Pen and just trace around that edge, and it's going to sort of frame everything back in and send your eye back down to the center. And it's also going to just sort of give it that finished look and help for your eye to have a place to rest there in the center and know that this is a boundary. And I love how it looks like rust now. So then there were a couple of imperfections in my little frame, so I thought I'd color them in with the Stampers Big Brush Artist Pen. And then I decided, oh, it needs some of that texture as well. So I used that same stamp again to stamp that pattern onto my frame. And then I said, well, that hand is a little too white down there in the corner. So I just put some of that marker on the palette, wet it down with some water, and then just added it with my finger. It will dry a little bit lighter than what you see here. So now I have taken, everything's dry, and I have taken my panel there and added some foam adhesive to the back, and I've cut an A2 card size that is 5.5 by 4.25 with a top fold. I felt like my card needed a little bit more of that fencing, so I'm just creating another piece there, and I'm going to put it on the right side of that Polaroid, and that's just going to help to give it a little bit of weight and help to balance out across the card. So I love the look of that. Great way to use up some scraps and things like that. So here are the close-ups of this luscious card. Absolutely gorgeous. It's a work of art all by itself. I love that spritzing all of these elements the final time kind of helped those stars to have placement here, and they look like they belong. Look at all that texture from the stamp. Just absolutely gorgeous, gorgeous. Here's the card. As always, thank you so much for hanging out with me through this entire process video. I hope you've enjoyed this production. If you have, please make sure you give me a thumbs up, a comment, and share this with a friend. Also, don't forget to go check out the blog post that I have linked up down below for all the details on the products and better photos. And then if you decide to try any of these techniques, please hashtag following Tonya Gibbs in your Instagram and your Twitter feed so I can see what you've done. It totally inspires me to see what you guys are creating as well. So thanks a lot.